This work started in 1984. I was a young photographer, unemployed myself, on the dole, claiming Social Security. And sometimes the simplest things to do are the things immediately in front of you. And my experience, my direct experience, was queuing up in these offices, waiting, being called in for interviews, checkups and so on. And of course at the time, the Mrs. Thatcher's government was using sort of the threat of unemployment to break the unions, for rightly or wrongly, and using it as a sort of economic device to control wage demands. And so unemployment rose very fast in England, and the conditions that these offices were used to handling became overburdened, and the queues became too big, the squalor became too much, and it became quite shocking. So I started to try and photograph in the offices and reflect upon this a little bit. I don't know if they're overtly political, because they're very straightforward. I mean, they literally are just photographs of the interiors of offices. There's no loud proclamation in them. But they talk about that point where an economic principle, or a political principle, meets the citizens, meets its constituents. They kind of had a double controversy to them. The first one was, of course, the political worth of them, you know, which historically now we see. It wasn't so clear at the time that it did reflect on these degrading conditions, these insufferable conditions of people at the poorer end of the spectrum. And that had quite a good effect then. They were on like Radio 4, World at 1 and things like that as a political thing, and they did actually make some small, you know, changes, or at least probably to the paint in the offices at the time. But then they also had a photographic controversy to them because they were in color. And now people don't recognize that. They don't see it now because color in contemporary art photography has become so commonplace and so accepted. But 20 years ago, this kind of work, the work that engaged with this subject matter, was seen as the territory of concerned black and white documentary photographers, Magnum, etc. And to do this in color, the controversy was that you were somehow trivializing your subject. To have this baby in a pink outfit somehow made it happy and cheerful, and the color made it brighter and more optimistic, and supposedly took away from the message of the pictures. And somehow it was seen that reducing the world to a grayscale was the only way to do this. And that was a lot of problems. You know, it was very hard to show them at the time, and made a lot of, took quite a bit of photographic flack for working in color there and then. But I think now it's very accepted. And unfortunately, it's almost invisible, that quality of the work, 20 years later. Well, I had to, when I decided I wanted to take these pictures, I tried to get permission to work officially, but the DHSS and the Department of Employment, they wouldn't give it to me. They said they would give it to me if I wanted to come back at 5 o'clock or at weekends and photograph the offices when they're empty, but of course, that's completely pointless for the project. So I had to work in a candid or concealed manner from the staff, from security staff there and the individual staff, which you'll notice none of them appear in the pictures. But not necessarily candid from the people. But I would go in there and hang around the offices all day, all morning, all afternoon, perhaps another day, and just work with my camera around my neck or on my knees beside me, on the chair beside me, just gradually taking pictures through the day, perhaps doing a couple of rolls. Which meant, you know, you can see here that I was just sitting on a bench beside this person here and there's someone else's legs there. But because I wasn't looking through the camera, I wasn't holding it up very obviously, I had it around my neck, I wouldn't always get it straight. So you'd end up with these slightly off-kilter compositions that were slightly haphazard, which I could correct in the darkroom. I could just enlarge it and make a neat, perfect, corrected square out of it. But when I looked at it, I realized I liked that. I enjoyed that sway to the world, that disorientation, because that's what's happening to the people in it, that sort of falling away, out of control thing, like a ship that's listing one way or another. And I realized it was more faithful to the feeling I wanted to engender in the work.